Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Magenta Mix Podcast, where we explore the intersection of purpose, strategy, and culture in shaping the future of work. Today, we're delving into a concept that challenges the core of traditional organizational structures: eliminating middle managers. Yes, you heard me right. There are companies everywhere looking to or actually eliminating middle managers. We will explore this topic with our special guest, Roberta Matuson. Roberta is known as the talent maximizer, and she's the author of that's right, 7 books, including the recently released 3rd edition of Suddenly in Charge: Managing Up, Managing Down, Succeeding All Around, and The Magnetic Leader. Roberta is a globally recognized leader and talent management expert, helping organizations and individuals unlock their full potential. With over 30 years of experience, she's advised Fortune 500 companies like General Motors, Microsoft, Best Buy, and also startups on building high-performing teams and thriving workplace cultures. She is a LinkedIn top voice in leadership and workplaces and a contributor to Forbes and HBR. Wow. She's also one of the few people who has appeared on Bill O'Reilly's The O'Reilly Factor, who left the show unscathed, and that's remarkable. Like all our guests on the Magenta Mix, Roberta's a pretty big deal. Roberta, welcome. It is so nice to see you and to have you here on the Magenta Mix podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Gary.
So I've been excited to talk to you because there's so much changing in the world of hierarchy in organizations. And I think if you look at how remote work, accelerated by the pandemic, is really changing how organizations are looking at hierarchy and even flattening their organizations to empower frontline employees is what we hear a lot. But also at the same time, eliminating potentially layers of management and people managers. I'm reading a recent data piece here that says over 17% of the US workforce is comprised of middle managers, and we know their roles are often about overseeing or directing, as much as I dislike that word, directing teams in physical office space. The landscape has shifted on things. The pandemic has accelerated the rise in remote workforce. And companies are saying, do we really need those traditional types of managers? So, Roberta, what happens if we eliminate them? What happens if we ask them to go do something else?
Well, some companies, as you know, already are doing that. What I think is really interesting is if you think about it, out of sight is out of mind, right? And you don't ever realize how much work somebody really does until the day they walk out. And so these companies that have been eliminating these middle managers left and right, up and down, I think they're going to be quite shocked when the executives come in and realize, holy cow, like these people actually did something. They did a lot, and now they're gone. And I believe that pendulum is going to swing right back the other way.
Well, so you say they did a lot, or they do a lot. Agreed. I look at so many people managers today at every level as manager coaches. Sure, I'm engaging my team and I'm responsible for ensuring really the well-being of many team members and their contribution. But at the same time, middle managers are also doing actual work in that player coach. And so I'm curious, what's the impact, not just on productivity in your mind, but what's the impact on employee engagement? We're always focused at the Magenta Mix on purpose, strategy, and culture. So I'm thinking about middle managers playing the role as the direct conduit from the strategy desk at the C-level to the hearts and minds of the front line. Thinking of these middle managers as the chief engagement officers around not just strategy, but also culture and connectivity. What's the impact there?
Well, I think it's going to be very severe. I mean, if you look at what just, is happening, it just happened at Bayer, right? Where they're going to this crazy new system that their CEO has come up with, where they're going to eliminate, I believe, all of middle management or something crazy like that. When you look at what happens when there isn't a direct manager, especially when you look at the younger workforce, they're coming in and they want people to guide them. They want to grow, they want to be developed. And I can guarantee you that the senior VP is not going to have the time nor the patience to develop somebody much more junior. So I think we're going to see employee engagement numbers plummet. And from the last time I read, we're not doing all that great anyhow. So it's a little scary. And I think it's a great time for you and I to be in business, but not so great to be in leadership.
So I'm going to agree with you on this. I'm working with a couple of leadership teams right now where I say to them regularly when we're talking about things like strategy and culture, you're 10 people, you're 20 people as leaders. When you think about the next level down and it starts to really multiply to the next level of 75 and then the next level of 750 leaders, those people are really the ones that have their hands on the front line. And that's where everything that happens matters. That's where they're touching the customer, really motivating the people who are doing the work, inspiring the people that are doing the work. And you're right. These senior leaders, they already have 8, 10, 12, 14 directs already, many of them too many. How are they going to now take on the next 100, 200, in some organizations, thousands? It's not possible.
No, it is not. Although the CEO of Bayer thinks it is, but we'll just leave him out of this for now.
So, are you familiar with holacracy? Am I saying it right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know, because it's not a term that seems to come up anymore because, as you already know, it didn't really work out that well for Zappos.
So that's where I'm so glad that you went there. So it was a term that I remember, I don't know, a decade ago, sort of playing with. That's interesting. The whole flattening and no hierarchy, and we've got to empower our people. I'm all for empowering our people, making organizations flatter. I use the term chief engagement officer a lot, or CEO a lot, to describe the role of the mid-level manager and even director in engaging their employees. And I think that's really important. When I look back at Zappos, for example, and I remember going to Zappos school and being in several conversations with Tony Hsieh over the years when he was leading that organization, and thinking, okay, maybe I need to readjust my thinking. As passionate as I am about this idea of CEO or chief engagement officer, there is a real, there's a real need for us to progress our thinking. So I know that over time, Roberta, I've been trying to challenge myself to think differently as the author of several books trying to help middle managers be better. Am I just being, I don't know, too old school here, that I can't get my head around this?
No, because if you're old school, that makes me old school, because when I first read about holacracy or whatever the heck it is, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is like total chaos. And it's very interesting. Zappos did it for a while, but then it went away very quietly. So it wasn't like they made an announcement one day like, okay, we tried it, it didn't work. It's great to be innovative, but not when it doesn't work. And so, in preparation for our conversation, I went and Googled, like, okay, well, this is interesting. I actually asked AI how many companies were using holacracy, and it gave me a list of 5. And then I had to correct it and tell them, no, Zappos is not using it. And so then it went back, and out of the other 4 names on there, it only came up with 1 that was still using this practice. So, I think that leaders have to be really careful about, it's great to be an innovator and to be ahead of the curve, but you don't want to go over the curve, right? You don't want to go over the edge. And I think that's what these kind of practices do. We've been studying management and leadership and organizational structure for years. I think we have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't. So,
Yeah. So here's what's interesting to me is this, as we're seeing, I think the first big resurgence of this mindset in about a decade. What's interesting is that the data will tell us, and just even anecdotally, what I'm hearing is that I don't want to use the term younger, because I know that we have 5 generations of workers in the workforce. Let's talk about frontline employees. Frontline employees are looking to invest in companies who are going to invest in them at any stage of their career. A retiree re-entering the workforce to get out of the house, somebody just coming out of college, somebody who's entering the workforce as a teen for the first time, a part-time previous stay-at-home parent. Any of these groups are saying, I want an organization that's going to train me, where I'm going to learn, where I have a manager who's investing in my development. These are the things that today's employee at any stage is asking for. What makes business think that they can eliminate the group that delivers them that type of interaction? Where are they
well,
getting the permission or the idea to do this?
because it's all about the bottom line. While they're cutting the fat in the middle of the organization, the fat that they believe is there, you see the bonuses being awarded to senior level executives. You see what the CEOs are making. It's like, this is a way to send a message also to the market. We mean business. We're going to cut jobs, and therefore you should be investing in us, right? But I don't know anyone who ever cut their way to growth. And I believe the organizations that go in the opposite direction and invest in their people, they will be, in the end, the companies that you and I want to invest in.
So I agree with you on that wholeheartedly, because when you talk about the companies we want to invest in, here's what my concern is, and maybe what even I'm experiencing as a consumer. There's a bifurcation happening in customer experience. And I always make the connection between the employee experience and the customer experience. As we are in some companies really compromising the employee experience, I see the customer experience being compromised as well. You can't get to a human being. You're being answered by AI. And then there are that's one side of it. We're cutting that level of management. We're not engaging frontline. We're keeping our frontline behind the scenes. You can't get to them. You'll get an AI response. And then you go all the way the other way, and you've got brands who are saying, you'll get somebody live 24/7 who will solve your problem.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. I have to just tell you, I'm not going to name any names here, but I probably should. But I try to get in contact with the chief customer service officer of a major company, where I was having a major customer service problem. And I was told the following: the chief customer service officer does not talk to customers.
So it's funny that you should say that. Did you get that in an email, or did you get that verbally?
No, I got that verbally, which really ticked me off. So, I mean, that made me go on a hunt.
So many of my customer experience stories that I tell in speeches or I write about are related to my wife. And I'm actually more of the consumer than she is, but she is a very particular consumer. And so she had an experience recently with one of those retail brand names that you go, oh, wow, you're fancy. It's a great retail brand name. And she went to the department supervisor and said, hey, your website says this, but you've charged me this way. And she said, tough toenails. So my wife escalated it to the store manager of this wow brand, who didn't respond. So she escalated it to the chief customer experience officer at the New York City corporate office, who didn't respond. So she escalated it to the CEO of this renowned brand, who responded.
I would like to meet your wife.
She was diligent.
Because she sounds like me.
By the way, it was over $16, and that wasn't the point.
Right.
If I bought the jeans that were a small king's ransom, it's not about the $16 to hem them. It's about that your website says you don't charge for the hemming.
Right.
and had to go to the CEO of this wow brand in order to get a response. And he forwarded the message back to the chief customer experience officer, who forwarded it back to the store manager, who came with an apology. Just to tie this back to our topic of the day, we are eliminating that connective point between our people managers and our front line to talk to them about what we stand for, what our promise is to each other, how we treat the marketplace, and how we're going to engage our customers. So I see this, again, bifurcation where you have some brands who are really investing in their people leaders, and you see it in the customer experience, and others who have completely taken them out. This happens to be a brand that I know has eliminated an entire layer of management.
Well, let's ask them to join us on this show. Well, the thing that really struck that I take away from your story is they didn't empower they're not empowering their people. I cannot even run the numbers in my head how much money it cost after your wife sent that email, and her time as well, how much money it cost this organization when the letter went from, the clerk to the assistant manager, the manager to the district manager,
let me
the whole
interrupt you. I'm
thing.
so sorry. I missed an important part of the story. There was no middle person between that
Oh,
and the store manager. I mean, you really had to
yeah,
go a
yeah,
couple of leaps there.
yeah. Well, it's if you're going to eliminate the middle managers in your organizations, and if anyone is thinking about doing that, then you absolutely must empower your front line. They must be able to have the ability to make corrections and do what the customer needs in order to be satisfied within reason. And if they're not going to do that, then they're not going to be this elite organization that you and I are not even mentioning names about.
Exactly. Now, the connection between the employee experience and the customer experience, to me, has a lot to do with culture. So I just want to check in with you on that. What do you think the impact is on the culture of an organization when you eliminate this level of mid-level manager?
Well, I think what's going to wind up happening, and I'm already seeing this, is chaos, right? And disconnection. Like you don't like, I doubt that I'm going to sit down with the VP of marketing if I'm working in marketing and, shoot the breeze with her about, how my life is going. And she probably doesn't even know I have a life, right? So, I mean, you're going to get this disconnection. And when people feel disconnected, they're like, oh, they get a call about a new job opportunity where somebody's going to pay attention to them. And guess what? They're going to take the call and they're going to leave, and then they're going to take their friends with them. So, you may be saving money in the beginning, but I would make a bet with you that it's going to come out in the end that there'll be extremely high turnover.
Agree. And, you never want somebody to leave you for a quarter, 50 cents, $1 an hour, because it costs you more money in the vacancy and the replacement. Yet people are doing it because they're not feeling the emotional connection. We don't
Yes.
feel emotional connections to logos. We feel emotional connections to coworkers.
Yes, or their bylines or whatever their marketing tagline is.
Yes, we've got to keep the emotional connection there. And I'm just curious about the impact of remote working. I'm of two minds of it, which is cultures are built through individual relationships. It's harder to maintain and invest in those relationships in a remote environment. Yet I'm not under any illusions or delusions that the workplace hasn't shifted. It has. I have many clients who are saying, you're back 3 days a week. You're back 4 days a week. You're back. I don't know anybody who's still at 2. It's 3 or more, but still we're at least 2 or 3 days a week for some companies still that are remote. What's the impact there, or what kind of leeway, permission is remote working giving our employers to eliminate important lines of management?
Well, I just want to take us in a little different direction for a moment,
Sure.
because in the third edition of Suddenly in Charge, which came out last week, I interviewed a woman who works for Zillow, and Zillow has gone completely remote. And in the book, and I share with our readers tips on how to really engage your remote workforce. And they're having great success. They don't need everybody sitting in these big, tall buildings, but they have invested in their leaders, and they have taught them how to manage remotely. So I think it can be done, and it can be very effective. However, you just can't change the landscape and say to a leader who's never done that before, oh, by the way, you're now managing this team that you're never going to see. That's a little more difficult.
So if I understand you correctly, it can be done. You can engage your employees remotely. What needs to change? And so you and I agree, you can, for sure. It takes some extra effort. If you're not walking the halls, bumping in to one another, you have to create virtual intersections, if you will. How do you do that? What are you advising?
Well, I would advise what she's doing, and she starts every meeting off, and she's the head of sales. She's the VP of sales. Every meeting with an employee starts with, "Hi, how are you? How was your weekend? How's your son, John and Danny? How are your sons?" Like it starts with a connection. It's not like, "Oh, hi there, Gary. Let's start with your numbers. How are they? What are you doing?" It's like she's got a personal connection to these people, and she manages a huge workforce. So it's really about taking the time.
Yeah, taking time. The way I've been talking about it lately is you're really engaging the whole person. This is not just about engaging someone about the work or in the work or on the work. You're engaging the whole person, and starting with "How are you?"
But
is
she really cares.
yeah.
She's not
Oh,
just
wait a minute.
asking.
That's a
Oh,
whole
yeah,
different
yeah. It's
story.
a whole different story. She's not going through a script. She really wants to know. And I think people can tell when you're going through a script. Hey, Gary, how are you? Oh, yeah, great. Sorry to hear that. Okay, let's go. It doesn't work.
So, if I understand correctly, the key to being a remote leader is care.
Well, it is care. It is communicating with intent. It is, creating opportunities if you are able to pull your team together on occasion when it's necessary, not just because it's Wednesday or Thursday or Tuesday. Creating an environment, setting up a buddy system so that people don't feel alone. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that you can do, and I tell this to my clients when I'm helping them attract and retain their workforces. But, it starts with wanting to do this, and you have to invest the time up front. It's the same thing with your own relationship. You've been married probably for a while. I have. In the beginning, you had to put in a lot of work, and it makes it
I'm
feel
sorry.
like
Wait,
you
in the
are.
beginning, you have to put. I don't know if we had the same experience.
But after a while, it gets a little easier, and then it gets harder again. But,
Okay.
you do get that easier part.
This idea of care is really important to me, because that is the entire purpose of having that layer in the business. We need to demonstrate to our frontline employees that we care, because ultimately they're building the products or delivering the services or engaging the customers. And if you don't care when you're delivering a product or engaging the customer, it shows. What if we had people who didn't care, who were on the maintenance teams of our airlines and trains
Do
or
you think we
automobiles?
don't? Because every night I watch the news, and I look at my husband, I'm like, we don't have a plane ticket to go somewhere, do we? Like, it
Yeah.
is scary. It is
All
scary.
these things. So the care is what really is the difference. That's the 10% more that we need for our companies to do really well. So I'm so glad that you talked about this individual leader who shows up and cares, because that's where I think some of our best and brightest leaders might be missing the boat a little bit with this revitalization of holacracy. And that is, without care, without the demonstration of care, the human touch from our organization to our frontline employees who are responsible for delivering the experience, the product, the service, things will go wrong. They'll go dramatically wrong. And there will be someone waiting in the wings ready to take their spot. And the differentiation will be maybe even less about innovation and more about experience. I think about customer experience as the final frontier. Products and services can and will be knocked off overnight. What can never be replicated is the experience you provide. So
Absolutely.
let's backtrack this, Roberta. The experience is provided by human beings.
Yes,
Human
usually.
beings, ideally, who are engaged in the organization. That engagement doesn't come from a memo. That engagement comes from someone that they have a relationship with and respect. And while that may very well be a senior leader, that senior leader cannot multiply themselves enough to reach out to hundreds or even thousands of people.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy idea. I think when you reach the point of having, more than 10 direct reports, you're on the edge. So
you give grace for two more than I do.
right. Well, I'm trying to be flexible. I'm assuming 2 of those people are self-directed.
I think, certainly 10 is generous for me. 8 is a good steady pace. And yes, people do need more or less. Past that, certainly past 10, it becomes almost impossible. So here's my question for you. What advice do you have for organizations who want to do 2 things: do the right thing for their shareholders, their stakeholders, and give them a good ROI, and want to do the right things for their people and their customers? What do they do? How do they balance this idea of, I can save money if I get rid of a layer of people, or I can provide a better experience and outcome if I keep them?
Well, I think it goes back to employee engagement, right? And for me, the definition that I use, when you have employees who are engaged, those employees are willing to go above and beyond the call of duty. That's my definition of an engaged employee.
For
And
sure.
so if they're willing to go above and beyond, isn't it better to have a team of engaged employees rather than a team of moderately or disengaged employees? I mean, I'm just, based on the data I've seen, that team is going to be so much more productive. Well, I have an MBA, so I know that productivity is related to, drops to the bottom line. Like, I've learned that. So I don't know what kind of degrees these people have, but I mean, that's basics, right? And so I think when you look at it and you say, if I really want to increase the revenue in my organization, am I going to cut my way to growth? And if your answer is yes, then start with yourself, right? Cut your salary first. Let's see how that goes. Then if you still need to raise, the shareholder value, then look and see. And the other thing, Gary, I am not dismissing the fact that, yes, there is definitely people in organizations who they're not doing their jobs and they need to go. Okay, so I'm not saying, oh, don't cut anybody, but just be really careful how far you cut.
Yeah. Again, we're aligned. You and I need to hang out more often. I think the answer is yes, right? Business today requires us all to be prudent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And resourceful. Absolutely. We need to empower the front line.
Yes.
Empower them to make decisions, empower them to handle problem resolution in a way that they know and believe to be right and is still in keeping with the company's values. Absolutely allow them flexibility. All of the things that we know empower people, right? Decision-making, flexibility, autonomy.
Autonomy. Oh, look at us. We're speaking at the same time with the same word.
But you can do both. You can offer that
Yes.
flexibility and still have a people leader, a manager that will engage me, that will ask the question, how are you? Without that, I think we lose the humanity in the workplace that builds culture, that helps to execute and accelerate our strategy, that brings our purpose to life. And I don't know about you, but I use AI every single day in my small business. And at the same time, when I have a problem that needs to be resolved, and AI is online responding to me based on a keyword, and you spend 45 minutes arguing with AI, you just want a human being who cares on the other end. That requires them to have a human being on the other end of their work who cares. And those are our mid-level managers.
I
So
agree.
we've just got to find the right balance in here somewhere.
And we have to hire the right people. I help organizations select for success. I go in and I teach their leaders how to make good hires. And, it all starts with a good hire, right? So I think if we're able to hire the right people into these roles and we empower them and we give them good leadership, I think the sky's the limit.
It's an awesome way to bring us to a close. What's the last piece of wisdom you have for our listeners and our YouTube viewers on the idea of flattening organizations, reducing hierarchy, eliminating mid-level managers? What's your advice out there for everyone?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me just in general, and that would be don't tick me off as a customer because I will find you.
Oh my goodness, you and I are a very similar mindset. Continue,
We're
please.
both from New York, right?
New Jersey's close enough. Yes.
Close enough, right? I think that, listen, there's no such thing as one size fits all. I think just because a company is doing something doesn't mean you should be doing it. Like, don't be follow the leader kind of. Don't do that as your leadership, just because this well-known company is doing it. I think that you need to really look at the heart of the matter, look at the fact that your people are the beating heartbeat of your organization, and do right by them.
Care for, nurture them, protect them at all costs because they are your face to the marketplace. I am so glad to have spent the time with you today. I am honored and privileged to have had you on as a guest. I know that you are so busy with your clients. If someone wants to reach you, Roberta, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they can find me on my website at matchisonconsulting.com. They can send me an invitation on LinkedIn and just mention the podcast, and I'll happily accept their invitation. Or actually pick up the phone because I will answer it. And my number is on my website. So I will answer it.
Good. Roberta, thank you so much. Looking forward to you and I continuing this conversation one-on-one.
Same here, Gary. Thank you.